Listen very closely because the world as you know it is currently being restructured, and official narratives are desperately trying to look the other way. Right now, at this exact moment, the geopolitical fault lines between the United States, Israel, and Iran are violently snapping, and the shockwaves have just hit the one place on Earth that was supposed to be completely immune to the chaos. We are standing on the precipice of a conflict that goes far beyond a regional dispute. When Israeli military intelligence, American strategic firepower, and Iranian asymmetric retaliation collide, it creates a vortex, and that vortex has just dragged the absolute peak of human luxury, a city carved out of the desert and designed to be an untouchable safe haven, straight into the abyss. If you think the war between Israel, Iran, and the United States is just going to stay confined to military bases and contested borders, you are profoundly mistaken. You need to stay with me for this entire video because what I am about to reveal changes everything about global travel, international trade, and the illusion of safety. The chessboard has been flipped, the war has expanded, and the proof did not come in the form of a military press briefing. It came from the sky, detonating right next to the largest passenger airplanes ever built, in a city that promised the world it would never, ever see a war. Imagine it is 6:30 in the morning. The sun is just starting to rise over the gleaming glass towers of Dubai. It is Saturday, March the 7th, 2026. The city is waking up to another day of extreme wealth, beachfront hotels, and the endless flow of international tourists. The world's most photographed airport terminal is humming with the quiet, efficient energy of global commerce. But then a sound cuts through the air. It is not a sound that belongs in this city. It is not the sound of luxury sports cars or jet engines. It is the piercing, terrifying wail of air raid sirens. Shelter-in-place warnings echo across the pristine concourses. Passengers drop their designer bags and start running. Panic rips through the busiest international aviation hub on the planet. And then the unthinkable happens. A Shahed 136 kamikaze drone, an Iranian-made one-way loitering munition, drops from the sky and explodes violently right next to Concourse A at Dubai International Airport. It barely missed the main terminal building. It detonated just a few hundred meters away from a row of parked Emirates Airbus A380s. These are the largest passenger aircraft ever constructed, sitting on the tarmac, heavily loaded with thousands of gallons of highly flammable jet fuel. If that drone had shifted its trajectory by just a fraction of a degree, we would be talking about one of the most catastrophic aviation disasters in modern human history. Black, acrid smoke rose high over the pristine runway, staining the perfectly curated skyline of Dubai. Immediately, Emirates Airlines issued a severe statement. All flights suspended, city check-in points closed. Passengers are firmly instructed not to come to the airport. The global hub was completely paralyzed. But then, something incredibly strange and deeply unsettling happened. Less than an hour later, Emirates deleted that statement. They completely erased it from existence and replaced it with a new one. Operations are resuming. Come to the airport. Your flight is operating normally. In under 60 minutes, Dubai went from total suspension and shelter in place to resuming boarding passes as if nothing had happened. The city that literally built its entire global identity on safety, on stability, on being the one neutral sanctuary where the chaos of the Middle East never arrives, had absolutely no clear explanation for any of it. There was no official confirmation of what exactly hit the airport. There was no straight answer for how an Iranian kamikaze drone managed to breach the airspace of the world's busiest international hub in the middle of a massive escalating war between Israel, the United States, and Iran. The drone detonated beside a terminal, sending black smoke into the sky, while officials were actively denying that anything significant had even happened. You need to understand that what occurred at Dubai International this morning is not just a story about a drone hitting a runway. It is a story about a city built on a singular promise. The promise that it is safe, neutral, and fundamentally untouchable. And we are watching a war dismantle that promise flight by flight, siren by siren. To truly comprehend the gravity of what just happened at Dubai International Airport, you have to understand what this airport actually represents to the global economy and what 7 brutal days of Iranian strikes have done to a city the world once thought was completely shielded from the Israel and US conflict. Dubai International Airport was never supposed to be a target. It is not just a big airport, it is the busiest international airport on the entire planet. Before this catastrophic escalation, 92 million passengers passed through those terminals in a single year. It is the absolute pivot point of global aviation, the exact place where East meets West and North meets South. Dubai built its entire soul around the concept of flow. The flow of people, the flow of cargo, the flow of transit. It sold the world on the promise that you can pass through safely on your way to everywhere else, completely isolated from the geopolitical nightmare raging just across the water. But the reality of the Israel, Iran, and US war has shattered that illusion. You see, the airport had already been hit before this massive explosion. On February the 28th, The very first day of what is known as Operation Epic Fury, an Iranian strike actually hit Terminal 3. 4 airport staff members were injured. Dubai airport authorities quickly released a statement saying the incident was brought under control. Notice the careful corporate language: contained, manageable. They wanted the world to look away. But since that first strike, the airport has been living under a state of constant, terrifying alerts. Passengers routinely pushed into underground basement spaces, boarding processes suspended midway through, massive passenger aircraft diverted mid-air when the airspace was forced to close without any warning. And then, on the morning of March the 7th, the drone reached the runway itself. Officials desperately tried to downplay it. They called it a minor incident. They claimed it was just debris falling after an air defense interception. But the raw, unedited footage that leaked out showed a very different story. It showed an intact drone diving aggressively toward the terminal and detonating right beside Concourse A with thick black smoke visible from kilometers away. Let us break down the exact timeline of that morning because the sequence of events exposes everything they are trying to hide. At roughly 6:30 in the morning Dubai time, air raid sirens began blaring not just in Dubai but across Abu Dhabi as well. The United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense announced that their air defense systems were actively responding to a barrage of incoming ballistic missile and drone threats launched from Iran. Inside the incredibly luxurious airport, passengers who had arrived early for their flights were suddenly herded by security teams and directed to take shelter. They were pushed into basement corridors and concrete underground spaces. These were regular people, families, business travelers who came for a routine Saturday departure, suddenly huddled in the dark, waiting for an all-clear signal that simply did not come fast enough. Aircraft that were on final approach to Dubai were suddenly ordered to abort. Flights were rerouted to alternate airports, burning emergency fuel, and then the impact. The Shahed 136 slammed into the ground near Concourse A. Videos captured the massive blast, and these videos were quickly authenticated by major global news outlets. The drone missed the glass terminal by a terrifyingly narrow margin. It came down within a few hundred meters of those parked A380s. Then came the incredible whiplash of corporate messaging. Airlines do not suspend operations at a global megahub casually, and they certainly do not erase their own official warnings casually either. A deleted statement of that magnitude is a massive red flare. Someone, somewhere high up in the power structure, made the calculated decision that the first version of reality, the truth, was simply too expensive to leave on the public record. It forces a deeply disturbing question that every passenger trapped in a crisis asks, even if they never say it out loud. Did operations at Dubai Airport resume because it was actually safe? Or did they resume because it fundamentally had to be safe for the brand, for the economy, for the fragile promise that Dubai stays open no matter what war is raging outside? While the terrifying footage of the explosion was already circling the globe, Dubai's official media office was still calling it a minor incident involving falling debris, and then bizarrely denied reports of any incident at the airport altogether. But the cracks in the facade are becoming impossible to hide. A CNN reporter, broadcasting during the earlier February 28th strikes, captured a chilling detail that becomes exponentially more important with every single day this US, Israel, and Iran war continues. Dubai has absolutely no public bomb shelters. Let that sink in for a moment. A massive futuristic metropolis sitting right in the middle of the most volatile region on Earth has no bomb shelters. That is not a design oversight. It is a philosophy. Dubai was constructed on the absolute premise that the chaos of the Middle East would never arrive at its doorstep. The tourism, the towering financial centers, the massive logistics hubs, the booming real estate market, this entire economic model rests entirely on the idea that Dubai is a neutral hub, a safe passage, a place simply too valuable to the global elite to ever become a battlefield. But that core assumption has been violently tested every single day since Operation Epic Fury began. Families living in million-dollar high-rises have spent their nights sleeping in underground concrete parking garages because there is literally nowhere else to go when the sirens start. Parents are looking their terrified children in the eyes and telling them that the massive blasts echoing overhead are just Ramadan fireworks because lying to them is easier than explaining why the sky above their safe city is suddenly raining fire. And when the sirens sounded again this morning, passengers arriving for ordinary flights found themselves shoved into those same underground spaces. But this time, the drone arrived first. Now, I need you to focus because there is another terrifying detail that arrived alongside the footage of the drone strike, a detail that deserves your absolute attention and changes the entire scope of this crisis. Dubai has approximately 8 days of fresh food supply remaining. You heard that correctly, just 8 days. Dubai is a city built in a desert. It imports almost all of its food. There is minimal domestic agriculture. Every piece of fresh produce, Every cut of meat, all the dairy, all the grain, it all arrives constantly by massive cargo ships or by heavy cargo aircraft. But this expanding war between the US, Israel, and Iran has simultaneously crippled both of those vital supply channels. The Strait of Hormuz, the critical maritime choke point, has been operating at severely reduced capacity since the war escalated on February 28th. Maritime insurance has become astronomically prohibitive for many cargo carriers. Major shipping conglomerates have completely recalculated the extreme risk of sending vessels on routes that pass anywhere near Iranian-controlled waters. And on the other side of the supply chain, Dubai International Airport, the other massive channel for importing goods, has been abruptly closing and reopening under constant military threat for 7 consecutive days. Cargo capacity is violently disrupted every single time a ground stop is triggered by an incoming missile alarm. Now, 8 days of food is not an apocalyptic catastrophe yet, but it is a ticking timer. A futuristic city built entirely on daily global arrivals, and just in time, supermarket shelves begins to feel massive psychological and economic pressure very fast when those arrivals become entirely unpredictable. You do not even need empty supermarket shelves to feel the terrifying grip of instability. You only need wholesalers and retail managers quietly rationing their storage space, frantically changing their orders, delaying massive shipments, and nervously watching the clock. A sprawling metropolis of 3 million people does not need to be surrounded by an invading army to feel the pressure of a siege. It only needs the uncertainty of war to last longer than its supply buffers. To truly grasp why the chaos in Dubai matters so much more than just delayed flights, you have to understand the completely impossible geopolitical position the United Arab Emirates has found itself in. The UAE has absolutely no formal role in Operation Epic Fury. They did not participate in the aggressive US and Israeli strikes against Iran that kicked off this nightmare on February 28th. They are not a co-belligerent in this war. For years, the UAE has desperately tried to maintain a carefully managed, delicate relationship with both Iran and the United States simultaneously. It is the ultimate pragmatism that small, incredibly wealthy Gulf states must practice just to survive in that neighborhood. In fact, Iran's president publicly apologized to neighboring countries for the initial wave of attacks, officially stating they would no longer be targeted unless American or Israeli strikes were launched from their specific territories. But those words were spoken before today's drone slammed into Dubai International. The reality on the ground is terrifying. During the first week of this conflict, the UAE was targeted with 16 ballistic missiles and more than 120 kamikaze drones. Now, the UAE's advanced air defense systems achieved an interception rate officially reported at 92% for the ballistic missiles and 93% for the incoming drones. By any military standard, that is an absolutely extraordinary performance, but the cold, brutal mathematics of imperfect air defense are completely unforgiving. When you have hundreds of projectiles raining down, 8% of ballistic missiles and 7% of drones slipping through the net means massive destructive impacts keep happening against a huge volume of incoming threats. High interception rates still produce very real, very deadly explosions on real civilian infrastructure. The UAE's multi-billion-dollar defense shield is working exactly as designed, yet the terrifying pattern of explosive impacts continues anyway. And so the citizens and tourists of Dubai are left doing grim wartime math in a city that was never, ever designed for it. They are trying to calculate where to shelter, wondering whether the airports will stay open long enough for them to escape or long enough for the next shipment of food to arrive. This brings us to the beating heart of Dubai's survival strategy: Emirates Airlines and the absolute unforgiving economics of staying open. Emirates Airlines is not just a company that flies planes. It is the vital commercial engine of Dubai's entire identity. So when Emirates is forced to suspend flights, even for a brief moment, it is not just a standard safety precaution. It is a massive economic tremor that shakes the foundation of the country. Suspending operations at that massive scale, even for a single hour, bleeds millions of dollars. It involves frantically rerouting tens of thousands of passengers, scrambling to reposition flight crews globally, and moving massive aircraft across a highly complex global network. More importantly, it sends a blaring signal to global travel managers, corporate executives, and massive logistics firms that the mega hub's legendary reliability is severely compromised. But the fact that Emirates chose to resume flight operations less than an hour after a military drone detonated right beside their terminal tells you something equally, if not more, important. Emirates simply cannot afford to be closed. And Dubai absolutely cannot afford for Emirates to be closed. The corporate decision to resume flights while the smoke was still clearing was not a gesture of reassurance to the public. It was an act of pure, desperate economic necessity. And so the passengers, still shaking from the sirens, boarded their planes. The flights departed. Approaching aircraft resumed their landing patterns. all while thick, black smoke was still visibly dissipating in the air over Concourse A. The terrifying truth is that the entire Middle East region is rapidly running out of normal. Dubai is not suffering alone in this nightmare. On the exact same day that the drone hit Dubai International, a coordinated wave of Iranian attacks struck multiple Gulf states simultaneously. Saudi Arabian air defenses had to rapidly intercept a swarm of ballistic missiles and drones headed directly toward their critical military and global energy sites. Qatar reported massive mid-air interceptions over their capital city. Bahrain officially confirmed a direct drone strike that caused significant material damage. In Kuwait, the national oil company panicked and announced a massive precautionary cut to their oil production. And even in Oman, a country known for being the quiet back-channel bridge of the Middle East, a nation literally built on strict neutrality, 2 drones aggressively targeted a major port facility. What this means is that there is absolutely no neutral corner left in the Gulf anymore. A war that officially began as a highly targeted United States and Israeli military operation against Iranian assets has violently expanded into a massive, uncontrollable regional conflict. Civilian airports are being hit. Critical global oil infrastructure is actively threatened. Massive maritime shipping lanes are disrupted. The world's busiest international aviation hub is now forced to operate in tiny, terrifying windows of time between air raid sirens. And the Strait of Hormuz, the critical global artery through which 20% of the entire world's daily oil supply passes, and the exact route through which Dubai's desperately needed food imports must move, is still just barely functioning. A few brave or desperate vessels are still moving, but many are just waiting in the water, while everyone in the global markets is frantically calculating what the black smoke over Dubai actually means for the global economy. Consider the experience of a Euronews correspondent named Lily Dow. She was sitting comfortably on an Emirates flight bound for Cape Town when the terrifying alarm hit the airport. She, along with hundreds of other panicked passengers, was rapidly disembarked from the luxury aircraft and physically taken to a concrete underground space deep inside the terminal. They waited down there in the dark, tense and terrified, for an entire hour, and then, incredibly, they were told to board the plane again and the flight departed safely into the sky. Think about the absolute absurdity of that situation. 1 full hour hiding underground in a concrete space that was absolutely not designed to be a bomb shelter in a futuristic city that has 0 public shelters, surrounded by regular passengers who simply showed up for a normal Saturday morning holiday flight. And then they just boarded their plane. This is what human resilience looks like from deep inside a massive disruption. It is not cinematic heroism. It is not some grand military strategy. It is just ordinary, terrified people waiting in a concrete basement and then getting onto a commercial airplane as if spending an hour hiding from incoming missiles is merely a standard travel delay. But the black smoke hanging over Concourse A is not just a delay. It is a massive, blazing signal to the entire world that the kinetic conflict has finally reached the most vital infrastructure. The global economy heavily depends on this exact location. The drone did not hit a secluded military base far outside the city limits. It did not hit an empty oil refinery out in the deep desert. It hit the global terminal itself. The official authorities in Dubai desperately called it a minor incident, but the raw video footage broadcast to the world said otherwise. And the terrifying internal estimate of only 8 days of food supply said something much, much worse. As the literal fires were extinguished on the tarmac and Emirates forced its massive operations to resume, 3 massive, unanswerable questions rose immediately from the ashes. The first profound question is sustainability. Dubai International Airport has now been violently disrupted repeatedly for 7 consecutive days. Yes, the military interception rates are incredibly high, but the explosive impacts are still occurring. The critical question facing the world right now is no longer whether the UAE's advanced air defense systems can intercept a missile. The real question is whether a massive global city's incredibly fragile commercial and psychological systems can actually endure indefinite daily disruption to its absolute primary hub without fundamentally breaking. Can it survive without airlines quietly and permanently shifting their global schedules? Can it survive without global insurers drastically raising their premiums to impossible levels? Can it survive without massive cargo companies rerouting their fleets? And most importantly, can it survive without millions of international passengers simply choosing to fly through different, safer hubs the next time they purchase a ticket? The second massive question is supply chains, 8 days. That is the official terrifying estimate of food remaining. Securing alternative food sources requires open, safe maritime shipping lanes or completely reliable, uninterrupted aviation operations. Right now, because of the war between the US, Israel, and Iran, both of those vital options are severely compromised. The safety buffer of this desert metropolis is shrinking incredibly fast, and the clock is ticking louder every single hour. The third, and perhaps most devastating question, is perception. The entire concept of Dubai's safety is essentially a shared global belief. It is a collective illusion held together by international airlines, wealthy tourists, massive global investors, logistics firms, and foreign governments. The exact day that this shared belief finally flips, the day the world officially reclassifies Dubai from a safe, luxurious hub to a highly contested war zone territory, is the day the economic damage becomes permanent and irreversible. Because while you can easily patch a hole in a concrete runway and reopen it in an hour, you cannot reopen a shattered global reputation. That absolute breaking point, that threshold of total collapse, has not fully arrived just yet. As I speak, Emirates is still flying its massive planes. The gleaming airport is still operating, but the terrifying reality remains. A kamikaze drone violently hit Concourse A this morning. Passengers who spent an hour trembling in a concrete basement obediently climbed back onto their luxury planes, while thick black smoke still hung heavily over the runway outside their windows. Dubai is a city that was never supposed to be in this position. It was a miracle in the desert, built entirely on the promise of permanent, unbreakable safety. And now, every single morning, as the sun rises, that fundamental premise is violently tested by weapons of war. You have parents desperately calling military interceptions fireworks to keep their children from crying. You have millionaires sheltering in concrete parking garages. You have ordinary transit passengers forced to learn the grim routine of war in a place that was specifically designed to be the ultimate exception to the region's violence. The massive A380s are still parked on the tarmac. The global commercial engine is still desperately trying to run, but the air raid siren sounded at 6:30 in the morning. An Iranian drone detonated right beside a terminal filled with people, and Dubai's incredibly fragile buffers, its food supply, its global flow, its international confidence, are now actively being measured in mere days. And tomorrow morning the sirens may sound again, and they may sound quietly before the sun even rises. Somewhere in the residual toxic smoke drifting over Concourse A, the world's safest city is quietly, tragically becoming something it was never, ever supposed to be. The war is expanding, the illusions are shattering, and the absolute truth of global vulnerability is finally stepping into the light.